I see Commissioner Reeves. I'll ask the other commissioners and Representative Kloba if you can either let me know that you're on or, yeah, turn your camera on.
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. Sorry, I was harvesting tomatoes in my garden.
We got to see the evidence.
Not a lot.
That's all right. They look lovely.
They're going to be a nice snack.
All right. So it is 11:15. We have our full commission and Representative Kloba back. So I would like to move on with our agenda, and I appreciate everyone's participation and attendance so far. Next item we have on our agenda is a petition for rule change, adopting rules for manufacturers to selling to distributors. Presentation by Ashley Layden, our rules coordinator. I probably should have checked. Ashley, are you with us?
I am.
Okay, welcome. We're ready for you.
Thank you. Chair Sizemore, commissioners and ex officios. I'm Ashley Layden, rules coordinator with the Gambling Commission. Walter Antoncich, a licensed pull-tab distributor of Lake Forest Park, Washington, is proposing to adopt a rule to require all manufacturers to sell to all licensed distributors on an equal basis under a fixed set of rules, similar to what previously existed under WAC 230.12.330, which was repealed by the agency in 2005. This petition was heard last month at your July 8th public meeting, where you continued the final decision on this petition until now to afford yourselves additional time to review this issue and to also allow staff time to provide you with additional information on distributors and manufacturers in the pull-tab industry. Your packet contains all the information provided at the July 8th meeting, as well as the requested additional information on pull-tab distributors and manufacturers, including a financial summary for the past 10 years, pull-tab sales observations, and a summary of feedback received from distributors and manufacturers regarding the current state of the pull-tab industry. All 10 distributors were contacted, as well as all 5 manufacturers. Under the requirements of the Administrative Procedure Act, the Commission must take action on this petition within 60 days of receiving it. Your options are to accept the petition and initiate rulemaking proceedings by filing the rule as proposed for further discussion, or to deny the petition in writing, stating the reasons for denial and specifically address the concerns stated in the petition, or where appropriate, indicate alternative means by which the agency will address the concerns raised in the petition. Staff's recommendation has not changed. Staff does not believe the agency can reinstate a rule as requested by the petitioner because there's insufficient evidence to contradict the legal direction given by the agency's Assistant Attorney General in 2014, who found that it is unlikely that a court would conclude that such a rule is necessary to effectuate the Commission's express statutory authority to regulate gambling. And the petitioner is present today and may wish to speak more on this, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Antoncich, unless there's any questions for me at this time.
Let's start with any questions for Ashley. Any? Vice Chair Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ashley, other than the petitioner, did we hear from any of the other distributors who expressed similar concerns that he has expressed? Is anyone else that we are aware of having a problem?
The concerns that were expressed were generally that there is difficulty getting product, that there's price increases from the manufacturer, that availability is an issue, and that overall sales are slowly returning to pre-pandemic levels, it appears. And then there's challenges, I guess, with the market including multiple price increases from manufacturers, limited product availability due to materials shortage of workers. Not all licensed manufacturers are selling product in Washington. There's not standing inventory and orders are delayed. And that seems to be the kind of the overall consensus. I don't know specifically that other specific distributors are having the same concerns. I can tell you that 5 licensed distributors are buying product directly from Arrow right now, and a 6th licensed distributor is purchasing
Ashley, I think you muted
sorry.
yourself.
Oh, sorry. They're purchasing at a 50 case minimum. And so that's the information I have.
Okay.
Approximately half of licensed distributors are selling product to other distributors.
So the impression I have is that there's not enough product.
Yes.
But it doesn't sound, did any of the other distributors agree that we should change course? Or is there any outright public support for this petition from the other distributors?
I might defer to Roger or Tina on that, as I don't know that that was a question that was asked specifically of the distributors. I think that the question that was asked of the distributors is what is the overall state of the industry?
I guess where I'm going with this is I'm just trying to figure out if this is an issue for one, for one distributor, or if there's a problem here, if there's a broader problem that we are not aware of that has been highlighted through this process. I'd like to know if the problem is broader than just this one, and that would help me know the extent to which I might want to refer this issue to the legislature or not. I don't know, does Tina have a perspective on that?
Well, I see Roger has his hand up. Roger, if you can help us. Go ahead and unmute.
Thank you, Chair Sizemore. Roger Sove with the Gambling Commission. One other distributor mentioned that they thought the removal of the rules way back when was the issue, and agreed with the petitioner. The questions that you're asking were not specifically asked to the distributors, but only the one agreed specifically with the petitioner.
Okay, thank you, Roger.
Just curious to know what our acting director thought, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Interviewer Griffin.
Thank you. So I was not aware that we did not notify all manufacturers and distributors that this was a petition before them, before you at this time. So it sounds like we didn't formally notify licensees about this petition at this time.
So we don't really know if this is just one person's grievance. It's difficult to know whether or not this is a widespread issue or if it's a problem that where the perception is that there needs to be a change and that view is held by more than one. We don't know that.
No, it sounds like that we have not specifically asked that question of the manufacturers and distributors, nor have we posted any stakeholder requests for feedback on this. And that, which is not typically something that we do when we get a petition. Usually once we have once we hear that you would like to initiate rulemaking, then we contact the excuse me, the stakeholders that would be impacted about potential changes to the rules. So we haven't asked that question because that's not normally what we do during the petition time, because there's usually not enough time for us to do that. But no, it was not a specific question during our gathering period, information gathering period, to come back to you with that information.
Okay. Well, I'm really interested in what my colleagues on the Gambling Commission think about this, and I'll wait for that conversation until the petitioner has an opportunity to address us. But I'll tell you that what's on my mind is, if we don't take action today, does it make sense for us to ask the state legislature, and I'd love to hear from Representative Kloba on this, to address this issue, or at least to look into it? And I don't know that it would make sense to ask them to do that if it was just one person's grievance. But now it sounds like we don't really know. So those are my thoughts for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll circle back to it.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. So any further questions for Alicia? Alicia, geez. I'm sorry, my brain is not working super great here. So I'm not seeing any further questions. So Mr. Antoncich, would you like to discuss your petition again?
Yes, please, and thank you. One quick question, Chairman. As last month, will I have the opportunity for the final speak after public comment?
My preference would be for you to go ahead. We may, if commissioners have questions for you, we'll loop back around. So if you have information that you'd like to present, now would be the time for that. If we have questions, we'll loop around with you.
Okay. First, and this is off script, and I'm going to refer to my notes, so I'll be looking down occasionally.
Okay.
To kind of clarify Commissioner Patterson a little bit. I was only contacted yesterday by Agent Sauvé. For some reason, there was a communication mix-up. They had the wrong phone number for me. We don't understand why, since our correct phone number and email have been all over the commission site, and we've been in contact both via text and phone and email. But anyway, that's what happened. So he gave me basically the survey that was conducted for all the other distributors. And in all honesty, it had nothing to do with our petition. It was essentially a state of the union of the pull tab industry in this state. What are the sales have been over the years, how many distributors there are, et cetera, et cetera. There was nothing specific to our petition. So I don't want to be critical, but it really didn't do any good. I mean, it maybe helped you understand the industry, but not necessarily the issue. There is 10 licensed distributors in the state, 5 who are buying directly. There are 2 that are so small that they have no concern. One actually has a little desk and a chair in another distributor's warehouse and just works out of there. They've been doing it for 20 years and they don't care. One gets occasional event type of tickets from Arrow. One also is kind of tied to a large distributor, and then there's 2 of us that have the ability and the desire to purchase product. So while that number is only 2, that number is also 20% of who's out there, and actually 2 out of 7 viable distributors. So while the numbers are small, it's an issue. So anyway, on to the meat of what I need to say, and I'm not going to go back over last month because it's all out there. Hopefully you have had a chance to go and read a little detail and everything, and a lot of that's just personal, that's us. But I did a little more digging, and I would like to just present it to you. And I urge you, you have a mission statement, and I'm urging you to take the broad interpretation of that mission statement. It's so easy to take the narrow view and say, we're a regulatory agency, there's no regulation, it's not our issue. But a broader interpretation is available if you choose to go that way. Nothing I have read anywhere suggests that you must take either approach. What I've read says it's up to you to desire which way you want to go. There was a letter from Mary Magnuson last month that said the previous proposals were rejected on the same rationale that, quote, restrictions on pricing are outside the commission's mission. Okay, and then the second one I want to refer to is actually Ashley Layden read it, but goes with the staff's recommendation again, that they don't believe it's in your mission based upon the gentleman named Charles Zaleski, the agency's attorney general in 2014. Just a brief history. I think that the rules were proposed to take action on, and then after this attorney general's letter were pulled back. I can't quote you. I can't be sure of that. But this is the really compelling part of this whole issue, is do you have the authority to make this decision? The commission's range of authority is based on the Washington State Gambling Act. And it states that the commission, these are my quotes, and I will be honest and say I've pulled them out, the ones that benefit me, but there's a lot of other information in there. But it states the commission has statutory authority to impose restrictions on manufacturers and distributors if restrictions are found to be essential to achieve the declared purpose of the Gambling Act. The commission's rulemaking authority. The commission is authorized by statute to implement and enforce gambling laws of the state. And to me, the key word here is implement, not just enforce, but you have the right to implement laws. Also, you have the express authority to regulate and establish the type and scope and manner of conducting the gambling activities authorized by the chapter. Again, these are a very broad view within the Gambling Act. It also states the responsibility of the Washington State Gambling Commission is to adopt such rules and regulations as are deemed necessary to carry out the purpose and provisions of this chapter. So is this necessary? Mr. Zaleski stated administrative agencies do not have the power to promulgate rules that would amend or change legislative enactment. However, an agency may, quote, fill in the gaps where necessary to effectuate the general statutory scheme. Both comments are based on court. Both of those comments he had referred to court decisions. So this is going to be my closing argument, but I will just present it right now. Again, I ask you to take the broad interpretation of this statement. Excuse me, I missed something here. Excuse me, well, just before this, Mr. Zaleski came to the conclusion that the Gambling Act does not expressly authorize the commission to require licensed manufacturers to sell to all licensed distributors on an equal basis, nor is there any expressed prohibition against such a requirement, which basically to me means the door is open. Now he has put that back in your corner. That's the way I read it. I do not speak legalese. So again, I would ask you to take a broad interpretation of this mission statement. 2021 is not 2005, it's not 2006, it's not 2011, and it's not 2014. The landscape of this industry has changed dramatically since then. There is essentially one manufacturer of product available, and I pretty much, if another state manufacturer steps in, it won't be for months, year, or he said first of the year, and they're just a 5 or 10% at most. Back in those years, 2005 to 14, there were 8 or 9 different manufacturers operating in the state. Now there are 10 distributors, 5 major, 5 minor. Back then, there were somewhere between 15 and 20. Senator Conway mentioned that Washington has always been called the gold standard of gambling regulations. And this is true. And I think this is an opportunity to maintain that position. Let's be clear as to what the future will look like if this petition is denied. There will be damage to small operators. There will be damage to small distributors. There will be loss of revenue to cities and counties. There will be loss of tax revenue to the state. There will be loss of revenue to the Washington State Gambling Commission. There will be loss of jobs. There are unintended consequences that I don't know of, and there will be no competition. There will be greater profit for a de facto monopoly, a company worth $500 million. If this petition is denied, 3 or 4 individuals will control the entire market of the state and will be able to operate in any way they wish, with tacit approval from the Washington State Gambling Commission, and be able to do so with impunity. If all stakeholders in this industry were to cooperate instead of trying to dominate, this industry could be revived. Healthy, honest competition brings out the best in everyone. If nothing changes, the future path looks very, very bleak. I urge you to consider the depth of this issue and ask you to approve our petition. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Reeves, I see that you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I might be indulged, Mr. Chair, because I'm the one who moved to buy us some extra time to have this conversation. If you'll indulge me, my comments may run a little bit longer. I want to start by saying thank you to Mr. Antonsenich for bringing this before the commission. I think in very much a perceived David versus Goliath speech there, you've highlighted an issue for us that is really one about how we respond in a global pandemic to economic recovery. As you may know, sir, I'm an economic developer by trade, spent over a decade doing that work. And so very much empathize with the challenges in industry, not just yours, not just this one, but in industry all across the country right now that small businesses, small business owners are facing in the face of a global pandemic and a response to that global pandemic. In asking for the information that is presented before the commission today, I do want to also thank the hard work of our staff. So while Mr. Antonsenich, you articulate that this was not helpful in terms of your petition and that the survey that was presented, it is exactly the survey that I asked for, because for me, it was really about understanding the economic climate right now in this particular sector of this industry. And so I want to really thank Tony Hughes, Roger Suave, Greg Allen, and Rick Schulte for putting time and energy. Oftentimes when commissioners ask for things, you never know if it's going to be useful or not. And so found this to be very, very helpful. With that said, what I would say, Mr. Antonsenich, is when you presented this petition to the commission, at least for me as a commissioner, what really struck me initially was your argument that you were being discriminated against, that you felt that the cancellation of your contract with Arrow was really about discrimination. And as somebody who has faced discrimination, trust me, I can empathize with that greatly. But I think in looking for the key factors around that argument and why why your petition is looking to reinstate this mandate for a distributor-manufacturer relationship, I think what's missing for me is the proof of discrimination. In this particular instance, it in no way, shape, or form, and I think to Commissioner Patterson's point, does it demonstrate a willful negligence on the part of Arrow for any of our protected class definitions around discrimination. So for me, I really struggle with that argument. It's not to say you don't have a great argument, but I struggle with the use of discrimination as the reason for why this commission should be thinking about instituting rulemaking around this particular relationship. So if I take that factor out of it and recognize that we're in the middle of a global pandemic, that these are business decisions that are being made, because it's been clear through this survey that you are not the only person or business impacted in this industry. What I then have to look at is this really a question around discrimination, or is this a question about how this commission thinks broadly, to your point, about our role and our mission given a global pandemic in an economic recovery situation? And what I would articulate is, I think that is where, for me, the line really gets drawn. This isn't about discrimination. This is about what is the commission's role in helping small businesses like yours survive post a global pandemic in an effort to ensure that gambling remains legal and honest, which is our core mission. So then I have to look at the survey data that's been presented to us. And what I would say is, I would have concerns if you had no other avenue to acquire your materials. But what became very clear through the survey data, sir, was that there are other distributors in Washington that have access to these materials and can provide them, that there are other manufacturers who have access to these materials and can provide them. So then I go back to the question of, well, is this really just Arrow discriminating against this small business for some reason? And unfortunately, sir, that proof just didn't come across to me in your petition. It's not to say that you haven't, that you shouldn't feel grieved or slighted in this in business decisions, but I'm really struggling, sir, to understand why this particular WAC resonated with you, and why you would want a reinstatement of it, because I do think that then falls into the question of, is it the commission's job to regulate business negotiations between distributors and manufacturers? And so I guess I just need help understanding that, because it's not clicking for me. It's not resonating with me why this particular WAC, and what problem you think this is going to solve if there's not a broader issue in the industry.
Nothing that I am presenting has anything to do with the current economic situation. It has to do with the fact that we have been purchasing product for 33 years, and for no reason we are now being denied product. It looks to me like Arrow, they're using an excuse of, we're only selling to large distributors so we can get product into the market. We have minimum purchasing requirements. As I stated last month, we were never were told or were aware of minimum purchasing requirements until this letter showed up in opposition to our petition. So all I'm asking is that there be some rules that we have a chance to compete, to purchase, if there's a reasonable set of rules. And again, you're only talking about one manufacturer. There's only one manufacturer that makes any difference at all in this state. Any other manufacturers are irrelevant. The pull tab industry would be gone if Arrow walked out of the state. They own it right now. And so you need them to survive. And for us to be cut off for no reason, for no explanation, for no ability to contact anybody and ask why. And, in retrospect, I'm sorry I used the word discrimination. That probably was kind of a flashpoint word that isn't used. I probably used that improperly, but it is, and I don't want to sound unfair because that sounds like I'm whining a little bit, and I'm not whining. But all we are looking for is either one, give us a legitimate reason why you won't sell to us, and two, give us the opportunity to purchase under the same agreements you have with other distributors. And if we can't meet those terms, then that's fine. We won't be able to purchase from you. But don't establish one set of rules for us and one set of rules for the 5 major distributors in the state. Don't make us pay 30 days and them get 60 days. Don't deny us product at their door, but let their trucks come up whenever they want. And I don't know what the term is to determine that, but to spend 33 years starting from scratch and building a business that we're proud of, and then having our, cut off at the knees without explanation. The other part that, and I probably shouldn't go into this, but I think a lot of it is relationships between a couple large distributors and Arrow. We gained a couple of very large accounts from a very large distributor. And 2 weeks later, we got this notice. I have no proof of that. I can't say it, but
So,
yeah, excuse me.
I mean, in that vein, let's just leave it there.
Okay. So yeah, there's a lot of other stuff going on. But again, I apologize for the word discriminate, but I don't know, again, everything I read says you can make this change if you wish, and it wouldn't be difficult. I know that the staff said it's going to take a lot of work on their part, and I kind of would contradict that. I don't think it would, because we have had direct communication with Bonanza Press and Paramount Games, the only two other manufacturers that have any splash in this state, and they get ahead of their policy changes. Paramount sent a letter saying they got to raise prices by, they won't pay for shipping anymore, but they'll give you a discount. There's no big deal. Arrow has multiple different policies. And then the other thing that happens is nothing we can ever get in writing. The only thing we have gotten in 33 years in writing from Arrow has been price increases. We have never got anything when they've told us that we can do something. We're not allowed to purchase certain products. We're not allowed to do this. We have to do that. It's all verbal. There's no paper trail to follow. So it makes it very difficult to prove anything that's happened other than a combination of all the little things that have come our way in the last probably 10 years. I don't know why this is such a big issue. And then the big concern, and you know, honestly, I think the industry is in trouble. And I think if you put everything in the hands of one business that can basically control, and they have done it in the past and they will continue to do so, and the commission steps back from putting any controls on them, they will own the state. As far as if you think any of the liquor groups or beer distributors have markets.
Sir, that's a different market than ours. So, and I'll ask that you go ahead and I please answer the questions if commissioners have questions of you. But I think you've made your points of why you want this rule change. And I'll ask you to just please confine your remarks to answering those questions if you can.
I'll try to keep.
Sir.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Patterson. You're muted, ma'am.
I was just curious, Mr. Chair, if Arrow is in the room.
I am not sure. I was going to provide an opportunity for public input or public comment. Oh, it looks like Mary is in the room. So during the public comment period, there will be an opportunity if she wishes to speak.
I do have some questions for Arrow.
Okay.
So I'll ask them whenever you think it's appropriate. I would like to speak with Arrow here. Thank you.
Okay. So process-wise, I'd like to go ahead and ask any questions we have the petitioner, and then we'll go to a public comment period, and then we'll go from there. So Commissioner Reeves.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I can frame this as a question for the petitioner, but it's ultimately a question for staff as well. So feel free to call me out of order if this is not appropriate, but
well,
I am.
If it is in fact for staff, let's go ahead. And are there any further questions for Mr. Antoncich?
No.
All right. Well, thank you all.
We'll
go ahead and enter into a discussion and then go to public comment. So Commissioner Reeves, go ahead with your question of staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Kloba may know this as well, but have there been any specific small business set-aside supports beyond the federal PPE programming, either at the state level or the local level, that a petitioner like Mr. Antoncich would have access to as part of the COVID economic recovery plan? Do we know that?
I'm
Gina?
happy to answer that. We did some very specific things for
licensees in the liquor side of things. We did not do anything specifically in terms of businesses that are ancillary to the gambling. I shouldn't say, that's not the right way to say that. We did some work with tribes who are running casinos to, work with them on regulations to be able to keep their staff and their customers safe. I am not aware of any specific items that came through my committee in terms of helping out licensees on the gambling side of things.
Tina, would you like to add?
So we did not, what we did was delay reporting requirements and payments of quarterly license fees. Gosh, it was just last year, but it seems so long ago. We're slowly as the industry. Okay, we also delayed renewal time periods. So when the industry was shut down, as house bank card rooms reopened, the individuals wouldn't have to renew their licenses immediately. They were able to wait and actually wait an extra 30 days until they had earned some money to go ahead and pay for that renewal. That is about all that I can think of at the top of my head.
So, and I think one of the things I recall, and please correct me if I'm wrong, was that initially gambling businesses and entities were excluded from PPP, the federal program, but then kind of at the end of the first round, the beginning of the second round, my recollection is that the AGA was able to get preferential language in the rulemaking at the federal level to allow for these types of businesses related to the gambling industry to be able to be eligible. Does anybody recall anything different on that? Okay, so yeah, I think my recollection is that initially they were excluded, and then as that PPP program continued and there was a second round, the prohibition on gambling industry were removed. So, okay, any further questions, comments from commissioners before we go to public comment? And I have a couple, I think. So, Interim Director Griffin, if you could come back up. So my first question, I guess, is since 2005, since this rule was repealed, if the agency felt like there was a potential impact to keeping gambling legal and honest in the manufacturer-distributor relationships, did we have authority to investigate that and do some work in that area?
Yes, yes.
So we have broad authority without this rule that's being proposed and the rule that existed prior to 2005 and before. The agency has the authority, pretty broad authority, to intervene or do investigations, recommend charges if we feel that there's a criminal kind of enterprise that's occurring at that distributor manufacturer level.
Right. So if there's nothing, if we don't have a rule that authorizes it, there's nothing we can do administratively. And so then it would fall to a criminal act. And if there's nothing that we would go ahead and look into a situation, a complaint, etc. But it would only be on the criminal side because there wouldn't be anything on the rules like if we don't have a rule, then there's nothing we can do administratively, unless it's absolutely prohibited.
Okay, so and then if, for example, the Attorney General decided to look into an antitrust situation related to the distributor manufacturer relationship, would we as an agency be able to assist, provide resources and expertise?
If asked, yes.
And same question, I guess, related to kind of the commerce or interfering with commerce kind of vein of the potential recourse that distributors could look for. We could also assist in, let's say, Department of Commerce decides to start looking into this and feel like there are, you know, unfair or illegal business practices. We as an agency could assist with that as well. Is that correct? Without this rule?
Without what?
Without this rule.
Well, I should pause a little bit. So, so we would probably have to enter into, well, when you say assist, like there wouldn't be any other action that we could take. We could maybe just provide manpower and have to enter into an interagency agreement for that. But there would still be no action that staff could take, you know, with another agency, because they would be the lead. But we could certainly potentially, you know, if asked and through exploration of interagency agreement, could probably, but it would depend on the scope of work that they were looking to do, et cetera. But so qualified, yes.
Okay. So I guess kind of my last question, if the legislature instituted a statute change that required equal sales requirements on manufacturers to distributors, what would happen for us? I assume we would have to go into rulemaking to implement that. Is that correct?
Yes, if we needed to define anything further, but certainly if the change was to, you know, RCW 946, then it would definitely give us the authority, and that would be the change that would, you know, the AG's opinion from 2014 would certainly indicate, yes, obviously it's clear, it's under our authority, it's in our powers and duties, and yes, if further rule clarification was needed, then we could certainly implement rules, and it would then be something that we could investigate and take administrative action for those that were not following the rules or the RCW. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Tina. I appreciate it. And I, you know, hopefully kind of that line of questioning or, you know, kind of pathway doesn't make me look unkindly towards the petitioner, because I mean, I understand and you know, feel that there could be a problem in this area. I don't believe that the policy recommendation that the petitioner is bringing forward is the right approach. And I do think that it's kind of beyond our scope as we understand our scope at this time. So I guess I'll ask that you know, give me some credit for I'm not being uncaring here, but I simply feel like it's not the appropriate move for us at this point. So with that, I'll ask if there are any further commissioner questions or comments. All right, with that, I will open it up to public comment. And I know that Commissioner Patterson asked if Mary Magnuson from Arrow would be willing to answer a few questions. So Mary, I see your hand up. If you could go on camera, unmute yourself, and then identify yourself for the record, I appreciate it.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Mary Magnuson. I'm with Aero International. And before I say anything, Commissioner Patterson, did you have some questions? I should point out that Lane Gormley is also on the meeting, so if there are questions that Lane could more properly answer, I might try to defer to him if that's all right with you.
Okay. Commissioner Patterson, go ahead.
Were you planning on speaking today, Mary? Or were you mainly here to monitor?
Well, I was mostly here to monitor, but of course, prepared in the event that I thought comments might be necessary.
Okay, so, well, Mary, just hear me out on this. Why don't you guys just sell to this guy? I mean, this has got us all wrapped up around the axle. We've had all these meetings. I have sympathy for his situation. I don't really understand. You guys are a monopoly in the state, more or less. I know that might be a little strong a word, but you are a big company. I know you're recovering from COVID, but you're not going to die. You're doing well. Why don't you just help us out here and just sell to this guy? I mean, how is that going to hurt you? I guess that's my first question. I mean, why aren't you selling to him? I mean, what kind of pain is that really going to cause for Aero for you to sell to this little guy? That's really what I want to know. I mean, you know, big business gets a bad rap for, you know, using their power in a way that hurts the little guy. And here's a perfect example of how you guys could be different. And so just change this by selling to this guy. I think that would be the right thing to do, Mary, unless you can give me a really, you know, sound financial reason why that would be so damaging to Aero. And so that's my opinion. I don't know what we're going to do with. I don't think we can do anything for him here today. I'm guessing that. I don't know what my colleagues, I know what the chair thinks, but I just think if I were you, I would just put this thing to rest and say, okay, this is a problem. This doesn't look good for us. Let's sell to him.
Well,
So,
let me,
Mary,
yeah,
go ahead with your response.
Vice Chair Patterson, I will commit to you this, that I will go back and initiate that conversation. And
Okay.
I can't make a commitment like that, you know, to you. But let me just explain that, you know, this is a broader problem than just is affecting Mr. Antoncich or Washington. I think the interesting thing that the survey that your staff did confirmed that the supply chain, labor shortage, and resource shortage issues that both Lane and I described in your July meeting were confirmed by all the other manufacturers and the distributors who were contacted. So this is not a situation where the folks in Cleveland, Ohio said, you know what, we don't like Walt anymore. We're just not going to sell to him anymore. I know, you know, it may seem like that to him, or it may seem like he's been singled out, but the fact of the matter is there are companies like Walt's all over the country that are in the same boat. Aero cannot get product. We cannot get glue, ink, paper, corrugated boxing materials. It is near impossible to meet the demand right now in the industry because of COVID, there's no inventory remaining on the shelves. Demand is relatively high, and interestingly, I also noticed that sales increased in Washington over the last several years. Not last year, of course, but over the last few years. So there's demand, but the companies, and each of them will tell you this, cannot meet that demand right now. Okay. So no manufacturer, large or small, is getting what they're ordering. They're getting parts of it, potentially, or they're getting what we can provide. But at the current time and in this current environment, tough decisions have had to be made to try to get product out the door in as broad a application as possible. And we're doing our best under the circumstances, but it's a very, very difficult and unfortunate situation. I'm hoping that it will change, that we can come out of this recovery and go back to some semblance of normalcy where everybody can get the product. Right now, it's just not possible.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think that was really a good answer, Mary, and I believe you. And I don't think there's any ill will here or discrimination here.
No.
But I do think that this one individual has been is about ready to go out of business. I don't know that any of the other distributors are going out of business. And I just have to believe that there must be a way that you can accommodate him in some way so that he doesn't lose his business. And I think it would be a show of goodwill on the part of Arrow in the state of Washington. And if you could take this back to the higher ups, to just do that, just so that this guy doesn't go out of business. So I've had my say here. I'm going to be watching to see if there's a compassionate response to this request instead of a legislative response or a commissioner response. Just ask you guys to find a way to help this small businessman stay in business.
Okay, I appreciate that. And Commissioner, I'll commit to you that, I will engage in those conversations. If I might, I just wanted to also point out that, we remain opposed to the petition. Of course, we want to work with the commission in whichever decision or whichever direction you decide to go. I don't want this to be an Arrow versus Gambling Commission situation. If you were to decide to, go forward on this, which we hope you don't, we certainly would want to work with you and help to arrive at a rule that is workable and reasonable, and one that will achieve the best results possible.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any further public comment? And I apologize, I needed to go off camera. My bandwidth seems to be a little shaky right now. So any further public comment? And I'll ask you, Julie Anderson, excuse me, any activity in the chat that we need to be aware of?
No, sir.
All right. I will close public comments then and ask commissioners any further discussion or comments prior to a motion. All right, not seeing any. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair. This is Patterson.
Okay, Commissioner or Vice Chair Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At this time, I would move to deny this petition in writing. And the reasons for the denial are the fact that there is insufficient evidence to contradict the legal direction that was given by this agency's Attorney General back in 2014. The other thing is that the rule would contradict the Commission's statutory authority that was stated by that AG's opinion. And then I'd like to speak to that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, if there is a second.
Commissioner Levy seconds.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to deny the petition as stated by Vice Chair Patterson. Vice Chair Patterson, comments?
My only comment is that I have sympathy for Mr. Antonsich's situation, and I wish that there was something we could do to help him. I also don't believe that Arrow is discriminating specifically against him. I understand and believe what Mary had to say. I also, because Arrow has more or less a monopoly in this state, I'm going to reiterate my request of Mary to take my request back to the board or whoever she's going to go talk to about this, to see if there's a way that you can include Mr. Antonich in your sales in a way that would prevent bankruptcy. I think that this would show compassion from a big business, something we need more of, and it would show goodwill. So I'm going to ask staff to follow up to determine whether or not that conversation was taken back and what the results of that conversation were. Thank you.
All right, Vice Chair Patterson, I believe that we're potentially signaling that it is the position of the entire commission that Arrow should sell to Mr. Antoncich, and that would solve this whole problem. And I guess I would like to clarify that this is your request to Mary Magnuson from Arrow to take this back to her leadership, and it's your personal request as a commissioner.
I would never speak on behalf of the rest of you. I've had tremendous legislative training in that arena, and I've gotten in trouble with it before. This is me,
Okay.
little old me. But I do want to see what happens, and I'm hoping, because it sounds like there are good people working for Arrow. I'm hoping that it turns out the way I perceive it should.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I actually just am seeking further clarification. I want to confirm for my voting understanding that the request of Arrow as a private company is not part of the motion that isn't currently on the table. Is that correct?
That's correct. That request I made during my comment period. It was not a part of the motion. The motion was more or less cut and dry based on what staff gave us.
Perfect. Thank you, Commissioner.
And thank you for that clarification. Is there any further commission discussion prior to voting? Okay, seeing none, we'll again try. Commissioner Reeves, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chairman. More public or more comment than anything. I think a recognition that, to Mr. Antonsinich's point, the commission does have some thinking to do in terms of the role and responsibility we have to ensure a healthy industry for regulatory purposes. So I take that consideration or that comment seriously. But I would say, again, as an economic developer, I find that there's a very fine line between government's role of regulating the private sector and making demands of a free market economy. And so I think, for me, really would love for our agency and staff to have further conversations about how we help ensure an honest industry. But this isn't really about honesty. This is really about equity in the industry. And I think that's a question that we are still grappling with as an agency about what our role around creating an equitable economy, an equitable industry looks like. And so I would just ask staff as part of this dialogue to continue engaging in that, asking ourselves that question to Mr. Antonsinich's point, and to understand what our role could be, should be, can be in ensuring that we're doing the and both and not the either or.
All right, thank you. Any further comments or discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll try to do a voice vote. All those in favor of the motion to deny the petition in writing as proposed by staff and clarified by Vice Chair Patterson, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Antoncich, for joining us today. And I think that the comments from the commissioners were pretty clear that we acknowledge and sympathize with the situation, but at this point, this isn't the path chosen. So thank you, sir. All right. Next, we will move to another petition for rule change. This is adopting rules for minimum cash on hand for house bank card rooms. Presentation by Ashley Layden, our rules coordinator, and also Ann Heisman's, I apologize if I got that wrong, the petitioner. So Ashley, you could lead us off.
Chair Sizemore, Commissioners and ex officios, Ann Huesmans of Galaxy Gaming Inc. in Las Vegas, Nevada is proposing to amend WAC 230-15-050 minimum cash on hand requirements to allow operators who are running house bank jackpots to keep the required jackpot money in a separate offsite bank account rather than on the premises as currently required. The petitioner feels this change is needed because operators have expressed security concerns associated with keeping large sums of money on the premises. The petitioner feels the effect of this rule change would reduce the risk of burglaries, theft, and misappropriation of funds associated with having large sums of cash on the premises. The petitioner feels this rule change would also allow for increased accountability and tracking of funds as financial institutions are heavily regulated and maintain numerous records for various regulators, including at the state and federal level. Staff recognizes the petitioner's safety concerns for card rooms and for players leaving card rooms with large sums of money on their persons. Staff has policy concerns with the petitioner's approach because the requested rule change would not apply to the petitioner, but would rather apply to card room licensees and does not appropriately address how card room licensees would maintain reserve funds and pay out prizes. Staff has discussed these concerns with the petitioner and believes the agency could draft new rules to address how licensees will maintain funds and pay out prizes should this petition be accepted. It would be helpful to hear from card room licensees on whether they believe this rule change is needed. Under the requirements of the Administrative Procedure Act, the Commission must take action on this petition within 60 days of receiving it. Your options are to accept this petition and initiate rulemaking proceedings by filing the rule as proposed for further discussion, or to deny the petition in writing, stating the reasons for denial and specifically address the concerns stated in the petition, or where appropriate, indicate alternative means by which the agency will address the concerns raised in the petition. And the petitioner is present, so I will turn it over to Ann now, unless you have any questions of me.
Any questions for Ashley? Not seeing any. Ann, go ahead if you could introduce yourself first.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Anna Huismans. Very close on the pronunciation, by the way, Chair Sizemore. Chair Sizemore, Vice Chair, Commissioners, representatives, staff, thank you for this opportunity to start a conversation on our petition. I wanted to address two of the concerns that staff has raised in Ashley's introduction. We understand that this WAC rule applies to operators, not to gaming providers. However, it is, to the best of Galaxy's knowledge, we are the only gaming provider who offers the house jackpots, and therefore we feel that Galaxy is equally invested in the operators' concerns, in the sense that some of the operators have been reticent to go with some of our newer products that have the potential of higher jackpots because they're concerned of having to keep more money on the premises. So that's why we've kind of spearheaded this effort to get this before you. Unless there are, as far as the how we have not addressed to maintain reserve funds. I believe at one point, some of the rules, Ashley informed me that some of the rules have been recently repealed or changed, but I believe there is a progressive requirement somewhere that requires a smaller amount of cash to be on hand on the premises and then allows the operators to write the remainder of the jackpot in the form of a check, which is more secure and discreet, obviously, for players to take with them. As far as the thresholds, I will leave that up to staff and the commission to determine those, as there is way more experience with those affairs in staff than I have or that I bring to the table at this point in time. The other concern that was addressed is that it would be nice to hear of some of those operators that are in support of this petition. I believe we have at least one, maybe two operators on the call that are supporting this, that have expressed their support for this petition. So unless anybody have any questions for me, I'd like to see if maybe they're available to speak to you.
All right. Any questions for Anne? And I say Anne because if I got your name close the first time, I don't want to butcher it the second time.
After more than 20 years here, I'm used to hearing Anne.
All right.
Thank
Any
you.
questions for the petitioner? Okay, hearing none, then I think that we can go to public comment, and then those operators would have an opportunity to speak. So with that, I'll go ahead and open public comment on the petition for adopting rules for minimum cash on hand for house bank card rooms. I see our old friend Victor Mena on the screen here. So I'll call on you, Victor, first. Go ahead and identify yourself and any, if you're representing someone. And
yeah.
welcome.
Welcome, commissioners. My name is Victor Mena, and I am currently an operations manager for the Last Frontier Casino. And I'm here to speak in support of the proposed rule change that's been submitted. So again, thanks for hearing me out, Chair Sizemore, commissioners, ex officios. This rule would be one that would increase the safety of the card rooms from the standpoint of carrying large house-funded prizes that are associated with card games. So currently, if we carry a house-funded jackpot, we are required by WAC to carry all those funds in our cage at all times to be paid out in cash. Now, that piece kind of limits some operators from wanting to put a very large prize on a potential jackpot through a game, because it would just essentially keep that amount of funds in a cage tied up until it hits. Some of these jackpots could take a few weeks to a few months to hit, and so you potentially have that amount of cash out there available. So this would actually facilitate it to where an operator could store those funds in a checking account as that jackpot gets hit, to be able to pay out to the patron the larger portion in check form. And if there's any questions, I welcome them from commissioners.
Any questions for Mr. Mena? Well, I can't bypass this opportunity. And maybe you clarified it, I just wanted to make sure. So you're not suggesting that, let's say it's a $75,000 jackpot, you're not suggesting that the house bank card room gets a couple days to cobble together the 75,000. You're suggesting that 75,000 has to be available, just simply not in cash form. Yes. Behind the cage.
That's the way I would do it. I would absolutely have the 75,000 in a separate account, waiting to be paid. And so the current minimum cash requirement rule states that at the opening, we have to have minimum cash based on the amount of games and the largest prize available. And some operators would even contend that they would like to put a $250,000 prize out there, but that would also tie their cash to be in that cage at all times. This rule would allow them to make the house-funded jackpot as large as they would feel comfortable to make without having to be on premise. But yeah, I agree. It should be something where, and this is where the petitioner's rule needs to be vetted further by staff, as to the process of verifying those funds.
All right. Thank you, Victor. Any further questions for Mr. Mena? Okay, seeing none, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Anyone else that would like to make public comment? Ms. Anderson, anyone in the chat activity we need to?
No, sir.
Okay. I did see somebody's camera just turn on. Mr. Saul, were you hoping to make public comment?
Yeah, I wasn't going to say too much, but I think I should jump in here since Commissioner Reeves likes to talk about probability. I heard him mention that before, so I figured, hey,
Mr. Saul, can you please identify yourself and who you represent for the record, please?
Gary Saul. I am a consultant for Galaxy Gaming. And a lot of the petitioners, not petitioners, excuse me, operators have spoken to me about their concerns because of the fact, as Victor said, Mr. Victor Menner talked about the having too much cash in the cage and on the premises, and some of the jackpots that we're talking about, especially on a Pai-Gow game, can easily get to $500,000 to $1 million or more. And of course, none of the operators would like to keep $500,000 or $1 million in the cage. So it's very dangerous. They're very worried about security issues. So that's why it's really important for them to say, listen, we'll have the money in account. They'll be able to see we have the funds, but keeping it on the premises, we just don't have the security to handle something like that. So that's, and again, Commissioner Reeves talking about probability. And because of the fact that you have this high probability of hitting the top award on a Pai-Gow game, the jackpots can grow quite high. And that is the fear that some of the operators have, the jackpot growing too high, and they have to keep that kind of money on premises.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Saul? All right, not seeing any. Thank you for your comments. Are there any further public comments on this rule petition?
No.
Seeing none. All right, any further questions, comments, discussion by the commission prior to a motion? All right, not seeing any. Is there a motion?
Commissioner Levy, I move to initiate rulemaking proceedings by filing the rule as proposed for further discussion.
And is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Levy and seconded by Commissioner Reeves that we initiate rulemaking proceedings by filing the rule as proposed for further discussion. All right, any further discussion from commissioners on the motion? Okay, hearing none, I will ask for a voice vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Thank you, Ann, for bringing this forward, and I'm sure you should be looking forward to further communication from our staff.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, have a great day. That moves us to our next item, which is defaults. So I do not have, excuse me, I believe a presentation will be by Adam Teal, our staff attorney. Adam, welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. For the record, Adam Teal, actually interim legal manager. Get two cases for you here this afternoon. Just going to go in order of listing in the agenda. First off is Cheyenne Lockridge. That's cause number CR 2021-00213. Ms. Lockridge has a cardroom employee license number 6835471. That license is not currently linked to any house bank cardroom. However, it does expire September 16th of 2021. Regarding this case, while she was working, Ms. Lockridge called the cage and inquired about a $100 bill that was left behind by one of her customers. In response, the cage said that they did not have the $100 bill, and Lockridge said that she had either given it back to the customer or cashed it into the cage. The following day, surveillance saw that same customer who had lost the money and had asked that customer whether or not he had received the $100 back. He said that he did not. Security went forward and looked at the cage slip and saw no cash in deposit by Lockridge. Following that, both internal surveillance and Gambling Commission special agent reviewed the surveillance footage for the incident in question. It showed that she took the $100 bill, brought it with her to the cage, and then using some coats to disguise her actions, took the $100 bill into her possession. Interim Director Griffin issued charges for this case May 6, 2021, and therefore a response was required by May 31st of 2021. To date, we've received no communication from Ms. Lockridge. As a result, the commission may take action. She cannot prove with clear and convincing evidence that she's qualified for licensure. And as a result, staff is recommending that you sign the order presented in front of you, revoking her license. Any questions on this case?
All right. Any questions for Mr. Teal? All right. I'm not seeing any questions for you, Adam. I will ask if the licensee is present and wishes to address the commission. Julie Anderson, any communication from the licensee in our chat or any other form?
No, sir.
Okay. She does not appear to be present. Is there a motion? Commissioner Reeves.
Sorry, we're always slow on the team, sir, trying not to step on each other. I move to revoke, is it Cheyenne Lockridge's public cardroom employee license for the reasons presented by staff and identified in the record.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Reeves, seconded by Commissioner Levy to revoke Cheyenne Lockridge's public cardroom employee license for the reasons presented by staff and identified in the record. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll try again a verbal vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Adam, you have another?
I do. Second case in front of you this afternoon is Lina Thau. This is under cause number CR 2020-01588. Ms. Thau holds a Class 3 certification, number 69-19439, authorizing her to work for the Puyallup Tribe of Indians. That certification expires August 25th, 2021. And regarding this case, the Gambling Commission launched an investigation after receiving an anonymous complaint about numerous licensees partaking in a nightly card game, playing a Chinese card game. According to the complainants and verified through the investigation, the participants in that game would pass along a tin in which they used to deposit money, and they would not be dealt a hand unless they deposited money into that tin. One of our special agents interviewed Ms. Thau using her daughter as a translator, and she did confirm that she played in the games. She did pay what she referred to as tips, and that players were offered chips as a credit if they did not have cash on hand. Former Director Trujillo issued these charges February 26, 2021. Ms. Thau filed a request for hearing in a timely manner, which passed the case on to be heard by the Office of Administrative Hearings. When Ms. Thau failed to appear at a pre-hearing conference scheduled for June 18th, 2021, the Office of Administrative Hearings in turn issued an order dismissing her appeal in default. Pursuant to that order, Ms. Thau had two options presented, and they were on that order. One was to file to have the order issued by OAH vacated. That was to be done within 7 days of the order being mailed. So that would be June 28th. She was required to file that order to vacate or request an order to vacate. The second option available to her, according to that order, was to file a petition for review with the Gambling Commission within 20 days. Again, both of those, the 7-day and the 20-day window, stemmed from when the order was issued, which was June 21st, 2021. So to file the petition for review with the Gambling Commission, she was required to do so by July 12th of 2021. And while Ms. Thau did contact our office, this is her appeal that is in question. And the contents of that order were reiterated to her that she had these two options. To date, we've received neither a request to have the order vacated or a request for the Gambling Commission to review. As such, the Office of Administrative Hearing has dismissed the appeal, and it's on the Gambling Commission to take final action on her license. Accordingly, the Commission may take that action. Ms. Thau cannot prove with clear and convincing evidence she's qualified for licensure or certification, and therefore staff recommends that you sign the order presented to you revoking her license. Any questions on this case?
Commissioner Reeves, I see your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Teal, can you mentioned that this particular individual required translation services at the time of your initial investigation. Can you speak to whether or not any of the notices that were provided to this individual or any of the subsequent engagement with this individual offered those similar translation services, or were all of these notifications provided in English?
As with any case in which we issue charges, there is a standard form that it has, I don't know the exact number, but it has, I can tell you right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different translations of the important notice, which effectively starts the case. And that has, along with it, it has the instructions when you file your request for hearing, that you have the opportunity to request those services upon filing your request for a hearing.
Perfect. Follow-up question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Till, it would be your assessment that accessibility based on language barriers was not necessarily a contributory factor to her inability to accomplish the stated process.
Well, in her request for hearing, she did request an interpreter for Cambodian language. Again, once this request is filed, it's no longer a Gambling Commission oversight case. Office of Administrative Hearings is who handles that. The issue at hand, and I can't speak directly if she had any communication with Office Administrative Hearings, but the reason we're here in front of you today is because of her failure to appear at that hearing, and that's once a hearing is issued, the Office of Administrative Hearings then issues the communication to her to notify her of the hearings. And again, I can't speak for the communication between OAH and directly with the party. There were a couple of hearings, and I know that she did appear for at least 2 hearings prior to that. So that's about the best answer that I can give you firsthand.
Okay, follow up to the follow up.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. You did mention, however, that she did have direct communication with our office in a follow-up telephone call, I believe you said. Were translation services provided to her at that time in discussion of the 2 options that she had available to her?
If I recall correctly, it was her daughter that had reached out directly and had provided both. We had communicated with her verbally, and she had provided something. Again, the issue at hand here is just the matter in which procedurally these cases go and how they're in front of the Office of Administrative Hearings. Once they issued their, to put it in plain language, when we issue notice of charges, we're not taking the final action. And generally in defaults, as we're doing right now, we're asking the commission to take that final action. when a party files a request for hearing, it's no longer under our site. It is now under Office of Administrative Hearings. When they issued the order of dismissal, what they are saying is effectively that request for hearing, again, this is the request that the licensee or applicant would file, is dismissed. There's no longer a request for hearing. So effectively that chunk of procedure of her filing that, the request, everything that happened between then and them ordering the order of dismissal is essentially negated, and we're back to square one. And that's why this is in front of you in a default setting, is because her request ceases to exist by that order. So where we are right now is that there is no order, there is no case. And so the options that were presented to her is to open and reopen that case that was dismissed by OAH. That did not happen. She did not take that step to file these formal things. And it was reiterated a couple times to her daughter and through email as well, to say that it is on her to take this step, and she has not to this point. If that answered your question.
All right, thank you. Any further questions for Adam? So, and I guess I have just one quick question. So the tin or the tips were a de facto rake. Is that essentially what the big issue here was?
Not to get into the specifics of the case, because there were, as I said, a couple licensees. I will not take an official stance one way or the other, because essentially there were multiple versions of the story, some classifying it as a rake, some classifying it as a tip. Either way, no matter how you classify it, that negates it from being what is authorized as a social game or a card game. Is no matter how you classify it, the money does not go directly back to the home players, and there's money going to someone else. And that's the big difference here.
So likewise, if this were a poker game in somebody's house and they instituted a tip tin as part of that, then a licensee would also be subject to the same level of administrative charges.
Can, would, and have in the past, yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Patterson.
Thanks, Adam. Just a quick question. What did Linda Thau do for the Puyallup tribe?
The best answer I can give you is she held a cardroom employee license. Off the top of my head, generally speaking, that doesn't give a title or anything like that. So I can't answer her day-to-day operation side of things. But as with any licensee, she is licensed to perform a cardroom employee activity, and is presented with in the applications a affidavit to say that they understand fully all rules and laws apply.
Thanks, Adam. But I'm just curious, I mean, what sorts of employees are required to get a license in the card room? Are all employees required to get a license? In other words, was Linda Tran a dealer, or was she working behind the counter serving up food? I mean, I just wonder how familiar she was. I just wonder how cognizant she was of the fact that she was breaking the law.
Again, for purposes of this hearing, the best answer I can give you is that she held, and I'm sorry, referred to as a cardroom employee. That's not correct. This is a Class 3 certification. So again, I cannot specifically answer what her position is, but frankly, for purposes of this hearing, it's immaterial only because of what is in front of you and what we're asking. And again, as I said before, anyone that is going to hold either a Class 3 certification or a cardroom employee license, they are required to certify under the penalty of perjury that they're aware of all laws and rules that apply to gambling. And so I understand that doesn't directly answer your question. I don't have it available to.
I hear you. I hear you. I appreciate that. I'm having some thoughts. I'll hold back on it. Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right. Are there any further questions to Adam? All right. Not seeing any, then I will ask if the licensee, Lina Tao, is present and wishing to address the commission, or daughter, or anyone that is here to provide translation services for the licensee. And I'll check in with Julie Anderson. Any communication that you've received?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. I will take a motion.
Commissioner Levy, I move to revoke Lina Thao's Class 3 employee certification for the reasons presented by staff and identified in the record.
All right, is there a second? Seeing no second, I'll go ahead and second that motion so that we can have a discussion. Any discussion on the motion to deny or to revoke the Class 3 employee certification? Commissioner Reeves, and then Commissioner Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And while I respect and recognize Mr. Teal's presentation and a recognition that this is the way we do things, I am really struggling, given I think that there may be some factors that have not been outlined in the presentation, which I know Mr. Teal cannot speak to because he is not the licensee. But I think as somebody who recognizes that oftentimes the system is built to do a certain set of things, and not everybody, this is not to make excuses for the licensee, but that not always does everybody come to their engagement with the system with the same feelings about compliance, given her home country of origin. There may be some cultural sensitivity issues around engaging with government in general. Again, not to excuse this licensee, but I think the reason that you're seeing me struggle with a hard yes or no, Mr. Chair, is really around whether or not this licensee understood the implications of the process before her, and whether or not I respect Mr. Teal that her daughter translated for her, but having worked with translators in the legislature, I know that there's an accreditation requirement, that understanding the technical language of the law may not, I don't know how old her daughter is. She could be 12, she could be 22. I don't know. So I think that's where you're just seeing me struggle, Mr. Chairman, on creating a clear black and white line between her breaking the rules and, to Mr. Teal's point, following an administrative process and adjudicating that process.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Patterson.
I was just curious, is there a middle ground here besides taking this older woman's license away? I mean, is there something else that can be done to make it very clear to her that she broke the rules and, without actually taking her livelihood away? I mean, she didn't steal anything. It sounds like when you interviewed her, she just was very forthcoming. She said she was playing the game for fun. She'd done it 3 or 4 times before. The bet was between $1 and $5 per hand. The way it's presented to me here is almost as though she's just saying, this is what I did. I just, without really, thinking that it was a problem. I don't have her to interview here, but it seems like taking her livelihood away, potentially. It's an older woman who doesn't speak English. She didn't steal. It seems like there ought to be a middle ground instead of doing that. So what else could be done?
All right, and Adam, I'm not sure if that's you or Interim Director Griffin. I'll let you defer to her if you wish.
understand when you ask that question, and I understand the thought process behind you asking that question. The problem is what you are presupposing in asking it is that the same conclusion would be met. And that is ultimately the issue here. And that is what a default motion is in nature, is that in a general default motion, the case is that we have heard nothing from you. We can only assume that your silence means you agree with us. Here, what we're saying is the same thing, in that we did not hear from you in response. You don't have a hearing. You do not have a case that allows you to hear that out. And so effectively, I would not be comfortable, and I don't think any attorney would be comfortable with you reaching a factual conclusion without hearing both sides of the case, both the more in-depth answers to the questions that we can provide and that she can provide to us. That's the problem, and that's where we stand in a case like this, and why you are somewhat hamstrung to do that, is that what your question presupposes is that we know the answers, both what the Gambling Commission and what the certification holder has. And the problem with a default is we do not have the form or the ability to do that right now. And so while I completely understand the nature of the question, ultimately for me, the answer that I can give you is only procedurally what you are allowed to do. And here in front of you, the determination is whether, based on however you deem it, the procedures have got us to this point, whether or not it is worthy of issuing that the revocation based on the procedural things that we've discussed to this point. And so the options would be, unfortunately, at this point, are only dealing with that order of dismissal that has been issued with OAH. You could potentially, and what she was offered the opportunity to, is to have a petition for review or to have the order vacated, both of which, one, the petition of review would allow the commission to review only the order of dismissal and everything that I've said to this point, whether that was proper or not, at which point you could say she gets to go back to OAH and have her case heard. Or the second is to have the order that was issued by OAH vacated, which again, both of them go back to start at square one. We're dealing with somebody whose license expires in a couple of days. And so without final action, if she were to file a renewal application or something like that, we don't have a clear indication what, based on, again, what is in front of you today, what you're leaning towards and how you would like to rule on the specific questions being asked of you today.
I'll follow up then, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Vice Chair.
I guess I'm just having an intuitive day today, and I do not intuitively feel that it's right to move forward with this. I understand that this woman broke the rules. Did she break the law, Adam?
That's not a question that I am qualified to answer in terms of the end result. However, certainly the implication of the actions would indicate that we believe that there was a violation of the law. That's why it's in front of you here today. And
Mr. Chair, I'm not. I will defer to the chair here, not with my vote, but with how you wish to move forward. But I really don't feel that we have enough information in order to make a determination on what the right thing to do here is, quite honestly. I just intuitively sense that. That's all I can say. So maybe there's an emotion involved there. Can you believe that? But I am not really ready to vote for this today. I see a woman that doesn't speak English who culturally, I believe, probably, I don't know, but maybe these kinds of games with friends is a really important social activity. I don't know what she did for the Puyallup tribe. I don't know how aware she is of gambling. I don't know much of anything about her. And we've made exceptions for other people in the past. I just don't know whether or not it's right to move forward today. So
if I could quickly address that, effectively, if what the vice chair is proposing is to take no action, then what that would leave us with is an order of administrative hearing saying that she does not have a case. She cannot have this case heard. If you take no action, then we have an action that the commission initiated that there is no final action for. If she were to file to have her license renewed, without that action, she would not have a case to address this, and we would effectively have to be in this pending situation without any final action. And again, I understand the sentiment behind that. However, without taking final action, that license is going to expire without having this addressed. And so that would put us in a difficult position of essentially having two parallel cases if this were to move forward with her renewal. What I can say is that as with any of these default cases that are issued, when you take final action as a commission, that also does not mean immediate final action, as this OAH order doesn't either, in that the order to revoke will be issued, and the same courtesy that is issued of any default is going to be available to her. So it would be a final bite of the apple, and as well would allow for judicial review of this down the line. So while it would close things for purposes of our regulatory and licensing side of things, it would at least give one more proverbial crack at her being able to address this final order. But again, we're here to get final action, and that's what we're requesting.
I don't know if I completely understand that, but you say that if we took a vote to revoke today, she would have an opportunity to do what? What did you say?
So there's with every order of default that's presented, and that is the same for the one that's in front of you in that packet. I can refer to you the exact document that's in front of you. If you can all turn to that, the materials.
We'll take a minute, Adam. Go ahead and point us in the right direction, because I think this is important. Then, and I think Interim Director Griffin's also available for assistance, but go ahead.
So I don't, forgive me for not having the PDF of the full
That's all right.
thing in front of me, because that would have my computer commit suicide. But I would refer to, if you can look at the packet that refers to Ms. Thau's case, and it would be the default order, the final order of the commission in front of you. If you look to page 5 of that order.
So Adam, reconsideration, stay of final order, and judicial review. Those bullets.
So it says, yeah. So sorry, Julie, were you trying to correct my ignorance?
No, I'm offering to present it on the screen.
Oh yeah, go to town. Yeah, that'd be great.
Can you make it bigger, please?
Sure.
So what you have in front of you is what every order of default that the commission has signed, at least as far as the last 2 years that I've been with the agency. This notice is included with every order that you sign. You look above, you're all familiar with the form that you have issued the order that is above. That's what you have all signed. Below that is the notice, and that outlines the 3 separate options available when you as a commission sign this order, make it and issue it. This will be sent to Ms. Thau, and it will outline, and it's very analogous to what I read to you regarding what Office of Administrative Hearings has. It has the offer for reconsideration. And now what that would do is that would allow her the opportunity to come back in front of the commission and have her plead her case in front of that. Also available to her is, as with any case like this, is the option of judicial review as well. So the order that is signed by the commission that is issued has those 2 options available that outline exactly what her options would be after the commission signs and issues the order that we are proposing you sign.
And under the option of reconsideration, it says that she would have to state the specific grounds supporting her request for reconsideration.
And I think at least the commission has voiced that they would be receptive to whatever that argument may be. Nonetheless, again, the onus is on the licensee or the certification holder to do that.
All right, thanks for the reminder. I appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, so I feel like I'm a little bit of a traffic cop here. So Director Griffin, did you need to address this?
I felt that Suzanne might be able to help commissioners just a tad bit. So I was just going to relay to a friend. Thank
All
you.
right, so let's go to our AAG, Suzanne Becker, and then we'll have Commissioner Reeves and Representative Kloba.
Okay, so to take a step back for a minute, what is happening here is that once the commission issues a statement of charges, the licensee has several options. They can negotiate with the commission at that stage, or they can request an administrative hearing. Absent the administrative hearing, which this particular petitioner has essentially stepped out of, they've defaulted, all right, by not appearing, there is little options for the commission to take at this stage. There's no one to really negotiate with regarding what any particular terms of a settlement agreement might be. So really the option sort of left to the commission at this stage is regarding is basically to default this particular petitioner per your rules.
Or
you don't, well, I suppose you could not take action. So you have a violation, there's no action taken, and then you are generally precluded from taking further action against that particular licensee on those grounds again. So one option might be to sort of continue this so that the commissioners could obtain sort of, you know, if they have questions for me about the process or what is happening, or have additional concerns, we could talk about that further. Or to, I'm not certain what other options are available to you at this stage. Really, again, the issue here is that there's really, there's no one to negotiate with in terms of any other terms for the commission to set, etc.
And neither is there a record for us to consider.
No, there is not.
Okay.
And just to answer one of Commissioner Reeves's question from earlier, OAH does have a model rule regarding making certain that all notices considering the hearing, including notices of hearing, continuance, and dismissal, shall be written in the primary language of the party. or will include a notice in the primary language of the party about the significance of the notice that they are receiving. And so this relates to non-English speaking individuals. And this is how OAH typically handles such notices. So there's ongoing ways to make certain that someone receives notice in their primary language.
Thank you for that, Suzanne. So Commissioner Reeves, you are next, and then we'll go to Representative Kloba.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, it's very timely that Director Griffin invited our AAG to the conversation, because I'm not opposed to taking action. I hear Mr. Teal explaining why taking action is so critical, given the expiration of this individual's license and the potential for renewal. My question is revocation the only action we can take? Or could we say, we're going to suspend your license for 6 months and ask you to retake Gambling 101 or Licensee 101 or something? Are there other actions besides revocation that we have as tools in our toolkit?
And Suzanne, I'm sorry, is that directed to me or Suzanne? Because I think I
don't know who to direct it to, because I don't know who would have the answer, but either one of you I'm open to hearing from.
I'm sorry, can you ask that again? What the other options are? Again, the issue with that is out the gate, the answer to your question, and that's when we file the administrative charges, out the gate, the options are limited. However, the action that was taken by the commission when the notice of charges were issued was that we were going to revoke the license. And if you go back to my shorthand, hopefully non-legalese explanation of the process, is that is still where we stand. Effectively, we're saying we're going to revoke your license. When you file a request for hearing, then you are saying, I had take issue with that, and here is why. As I said, that has been omitted. So what you have in front of you right now is the agency taking the action to revoke the license through the administrative charges. And that is what you have in front of you by means of the default. So it's sort of two answers. Is there a world of possibilities, settlement and stuff with the second these are issued? Yes. Is that in front of you right now? No.
Suzanne, anything to add to that?
No, not really. I'm going to default to the commission statute at this point, which talks about the commission having the authority to suspend or revoke a license based upon a violation of the rules. So I would say that upon a default, your options are, again, very limited in scope as to what you could do at that stage.
Okay. Thank you for that. Interim Director Griffin, I see your hand. We'll let you go ahead and jump in here.
I was just going to add that based on putting together what Adam and Suzanne had stated, we just don't have anyone to negotiate with. And typically the process is, as Adam stated, we send out the charges, and then we can have, if they want to start, talking about suspension, those sorts of things, or a negotiated settlement, that is something that we would do. There's just no communication right now. And I would also say that if we did hold this over and she does renew, then she can, and then you decide to take action at a future date, she would not be able to recoup her license fees if her license was revoked because you held this over after her renewal date. So something else to keep in mind there. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll go to Representative Kloba and then Vice Chair Patterson. You're muted, Representative. There you go. Maybe not now. Still muted. Okay, I'll let you try to sort that, and we'll go to Vice Chair Patterson.
So if we take action today, she still has the opportunity to file a petition for reconsideration. And so she still has another bite at the apple. she could be encouraged to file a petition for reconsideration. And during that process, it would give, and that petition would come to us, the Gambling Commission. And that would give us the opportunity to determine whether or not her license should be suspended or revoked, or what should happen to her if she were to file that petition. Correct?
There's one other prong in there to hopefully kind of let you guys understand the full process. Is, again, I think we've kind of beat like a dead horse the sort of unfortunate options you have in front of you. They're fairly limited, but the one thing that I would add, and yes, what you said is correct, those options are there, those options are on the order. The other side of things are, if she were to apply for a license, as Tina mentioned, our ability to address licensing is fairly limited to suspension, revocation, or denial. If she were to apply for a license, a new license, because her license is revoked, we would then issue a denial, which would start from square one, a separate issue. So that would be a sort of pseudo third option other than the ones that were discussed that are on the order.
So hypothetically, we could take this vote today to revoke her license, and someone could make an effort to reach out to her to encourage her with some help with translation. I mean, hypothetically, this could happen, that she could petition us to reconsider.
And this, as with every order, will be mailed to the current address, and we, I can't speak to whether or not the important notice that has those different languages, including Cambodian, which is what she'd requested. I can make a note to assure when that order is issued, that same important notice that has the translated chunk on there will be folded in as well, because again, she will get this order. It will have the instructions on there.
In Cambodian.
Well, I certainly am not going to retype it in Cambodian, but the important notice will. It does. They have the languages on there. It won't be the entire order, but the important notice making them aware of the next step and how they can address it is going to
so
be there.
There will be information in Cambodian that makes it clear to this woman how it is that she can get the process moving for reconsideration, and that she has to do that within 13 days.
Not verbatim what you said. The important notice is included in all, and it essentially says that if you don't respond, you will lose your license. If you have questions, it has the contact information, and to call an attorney if you have legal questions. That's what that form is. As with any notice that is issued with the notice of charges.
All right, I think I saw that Representative Kloba got her mute squared away. Go ahead, Representative.
Yes, thank you. A little issue when switching from my laptop to my desktop. I have to tell which speakers to, or which microphone to listen to. At any rate, I believe the concern that I had about the language that the information was given to the dealer, the licensee, it sounds as though there's some minimal kind of attempt to put it in her language. And I know there was, sounds like your procedure to notify the person is the last known address on their license that you have given them or that has been issued to them. Has the information that you've sent been returned because that's an invalid address?
No. Again, there was a case with Office of Administrative Hearings. You do not get a case in front of the Office of Administrative Hearings unless you specifically request from the Office of Administrative Hearings that you would like to have a case. So the steps to initiate the case, and again, I don't want to speak to full-on procedures, but there have been hearings, and I'm fairly certain that at least one of which she was present for. So again, you know, it becomes an Office of Administrative Hearings case upon her filing that request. She did that properly. She was given the notice of the pre-hearing conferences, which again is the issue at hand, that she failed to appear. Those notice of pre-hearing conferences do have the native language that was requested as an access notice at the top of the orders. So you say, I speak Cambodian, they will, and the notice that says that, and again, under OAH's watch, they include that language that has the chunk that addresses you know, one, both acknowledges that there is an interpreter involved, and two, at least gives a brief amount of information in terms of how the very basic thing is, you have a hearing, this is the number you need to call, is that much is in the native language, and it has the dates on there.
Okay, I appreciate that further explanation. And my concern was just to make sure that the person had been actually reached, had gotten the information they needed, and had been able to access it to some degree in the language that they're familiar with. So I appreciate that, and perhaps can put a bug in the ear of Commissioner Reeves, who I know is very concerned about this as well, that perhaps there's potential legislation in the future about a more robust opportunity for interpretation, et cetera. So thank you.
And I would add to that, again, the line drawn between an OAH case, as I've kind of tried to belabor here, and a gambling commission case, is while the communication under the guise of the OAH case is from OAH, any communication coming from the Gambling Commission, there is statutory language requiring licensees and certification holders to keep up-to-date information. So even in the instance in which she has moved in the interim of this, it is her requirement to inform us of that change of address. So again, it doesn't directly address your question, but it's just another layer to throw into the concerns that are being voiced.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
All right. So very robust discussion, I believe some robust education as well, which I appreciate, and let no one say that the Washington State Gambling Commission just is on autopilot. So with that, there is a motion on the table to revoke Lina Thau's Class 3 employee certification for the reasons presented by staff and identified in the record. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing, seeing no one raise their hand, we'll try a voice vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, please signify by saying no.
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 Motion fails 2-2. So I will ask Suzanne, is there any further clarification necessary from the commission at this point?
Well, at this stage, you have someone who has defaulted on their administrative hearing, and you have no final agency action. Is there further clarification that you would like from staff in terms of bringing this back to you for further consideration at the next meeting to see if you can then take final agency action, with the understanding that her understanding from Adam that her license may expire during that time frame, and or she might file for renewal?
What is the desire of the commission? Commissioner Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to poorly articulate this, Suzanne, so I apologize in advance. I I recognize that the order before us today was a decision of the 2020 commission. I was not present on that commission. That's not to obfuscate the role of the commission, but simply to say I am not in a place where I maybe even would have agreed with that decision in 2020. And as such, am curious to know whether or not in the absence, because I recognize we're just dealing with the holdover of a previous commission's decision, whether or not we can either, if there is a process within our rules that allows for us to internally review the order from the director, I can't remember what you called it, sorry, that would say something to the effect of like, yes, we find that you know, there's an assumption that you violated the law, given the factors that we have before us. I'm just struggling with the revocation. I think I want some kind of action, but I want it to be kind of a restorative justice kind of conversation around, I think, given all of the variables at play, what other options are before us to take action, recognizing all of the challenges that Mr. Teal has outlined with, you know, possible renewal of her license, to Director Griffin's point, you know, the fact that she may pay for those fees and then lose those fees if some sort of decision moving forward were to, let's say, suspend it, that she could lose those fees, etc. I recognize all of that. I'm just really struggling with revocation as like the final choice in this process. So I don't know if there's a way to get to other options, but that's, I guess, the question I'm asking.
So Suzanne, can you hold your thought for just a second? Okay.
I can.
So one of the things that I guess, I'd like confirmation on this. So I believe this is the first time this matter's been before the commission. So the director made a decision, and then the licensee, who it's a privilege to have a gambling license and requires meeting some responsibilities, that licensee requested OAH to have a hearing on the charges that were brought by the director. Is that correct so far? So the commission hasn't considered this prior to today. And the reason that it came up before us today was that the petitioner who began the OAH process failed to follow through with the OAH process. So this today was to close our portion, to essentially acknowledge that that individual, for some reason, chose to not continue or was unable to continue that process. So I just want to make sure that we're,
I'm using commission interchangeably for the agency and for
okay, yes. So that was
not this body in particular. I apologize.
No problem. Okay, so I just want to make sure that was clear. So go ahead, Suzanne.
Okay. And so thank you, Chair. That was going to be some of what I was probably going to touch on. So Commissioner Reeves, what I'm hearing is that you are looking for some sort of, what I'm hearing is terms of what you're really hoping for is some sort of like agreed order with this particular licensee, some sort of negotiated settlement by which there could be education or training or things of that nature. And again, we don't have this licensee because they have elected to stop appearing in this process. So there's going to be limits on what commission staff may be able to come back to you with. And this is sort of why the practice is as it is. I think that there's probably likely very few options that may be available at this stage. But with that said, you don't have a decision, so there's no final agency action. One of the legal consequences of no final agency action is that this will continue to remain to be an open matter until the agency does take action. So if you would like to continue it for further consideration to see if staff can look at this and see if there's an option under the rules. I'm not saying that there is, but we could review it further and give it more scrutiny. It would be helpful, I think, to know precisely what you were, what are you considering that you would like to see in this order, so that I think staff could then respond to those things on a point-by-point basis of yes or no, or, here are some other considerations right now. Simply because, again, without the licensee present for staff to negotiate with, it's a little bit like a black box at this stage in terms of what the commission can do.
So
does
Suzanne,
that,
does this also put the licensee in a bit of a holding pattern as well? Do they don't have a next step that they can take? OAH is off the table now, is that right? I mean, they
that is correct.
can't
Well,
with OAH, because I mean, we haven't taken action. So
there's
the
nothing for
licensee,
them to ask for reconsideration on. There's nothing, again, you need sort of that next step in the process for them to be able to request reconsideration. Right now, it's more as if your final order is just going to be in sort of a holding pattern until you receive a vote of 3 commissioners on this particular issue.
all right. Interim Director Griffin.
Thank you. So I have a question. If we had originally issued, instead of charges for revocation, charges for suspension, and so that was the original, set aside, it was for revocation originally, say the initial charges were issued for suspension of the license, and all other factors remain the same in regards to her interactions with OAH, with us, with OAH, etc. And we're still at this point. How would that differ from where we're at with the charges for revocation? Would we still, if it was 2-2, we still couldn't initiate suspension then? I think that's what I'm piecing together. Could you help clarify that for me, please?
And Tina, are you asking me or are you asking the commissioners?
I think I was asking attorneys for the process portion of that. Thank you.
Yes, and so the commission statute requires that for items involving licensing, a quorum has to be a vote of 3 commissioners. And so until you have 3 votes, you will not have final agency action on the matter. It doesn't matter if it's suspension, revocation, etc. You would require 3 votes in order to make a decision on this matter.
And if I could take a quick crack at that as well, ultimately, again, to reiterate what a default hearing is in plain language, we took action, you did nothing to stop that action or to contradict that action, therefore our action takes place. So if what you're saying, if the question you're asking is, if in the pleadings we had asked for a suspension of 1 year, the same ask is here, that we took that action, we're asking you to finalize it. That was not what was taken with that initial thing. And again, the big problem here is understanding the issues that have been voiced by the commission right now is, as Suzanne kind of said, is while the thought process is understood, the forum is not available to hear those arguments out. It's one or the other. If it was suspension, it's suspension or nothing. If it's revocation, it's revocation or nothing. And while certainly the thought process is understood here, in terms of the ultimate action, there's no forum to entertain that here in the process that we're currently under.
Thank you, Adam. Tina, did you have further? Or?
No, I was just, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Patterson.
Oh, my question is, if there were a majority who had moved forward with this, let me see if I understand this. If we had moved forward with this, there would then be a process whereby Linda Thau could ask us to reconsider, a suspension instead of a revocation, correct?
Not explicitly. The reconsideration, and again, I would refer
I'm sorry, Adam, before you try to, I apologize for interrupting. There would be a process for reconsideration. During that process of reconsideration, she could make a case for suspension. Is that correct?
What a reconsideration is you are being asked to reconsider your decision. So again, it's not a forum. You are in the same exact position that you are right now. The same options are available to remand or to do anything like that. But again, the reconsideration is you made a decision. In this instance, it would be to revoke, hypothetically speaking. She is then asking you to reconsider the decision that you made to revoke, and that opens up the same dialogue that we're having right now. It's not a fact. It doesn't open up a factual argument. We're only talking about the default right now. So the same, what you have kind of proposed and asked about to reinitiate would still be available. Okay.
Boy, we're really, I really feel boxed in by this discussion today, and I don't feel comfortable with my vote, but I think if I had voted the other way, I would feel equally uncomfortable. So this is just really feeling boxed in.
Well, I would say that's why we get the big bucks, but that's obviously not the case. So and I raised my hand in this circumstance just so that I can take my place in line and not be viewed as taking over the conversation. And I think, and first of all, a question as to probably Adam, maybe Suzanne, but for Commissioner Patterson's, preferred kind of outcome, if we took final action on this today, if we reconsidered our vote and 3 commissioners voted to revoke, 3 or more, then she would have not only reconsideration, but judicial review. So if in fact she requested a judicial review, then we as a commission would sit in that role, not us or OAH would sit in judicial review. No,
judicial is a court.
So
that's that. Now we're chopping the Gambling Commission out. Now we're chopping OAH out, and now a judge will have everything that is on the record at this point in front of them to do as they will with that information. And the same options may be available that just say, hey, this is a procedural hiccup and remand it back down to OAH. I don't want to speculate as to what the end results of a judicial review is. But again, much like OAH is kind of washing their hands clean of this by issuing the order to dismiss, then our hands are washed clean, at least for the time being, because it's then in front of a court of law.
Okay, thank you. So Suzanne, this is for you, I guess, then. If in order for a motion to reconsider, it would have to be somebody on the prevailing side or the no side, I guess. Either Commissioner Patterson or Reeves could bring this up for reconsideration prior to the end of this meeting. Is that right?
That's a great question. I've never heard of a commission asking to. So reconsideration would generally involve either the staff asking the commission to reconsider whatever their decision was, or the licensee to asking the commission to reconsider what their decision was. If you're asking if you can table this till, say, the end of the meeting, absolutely. You certainly can. You can also, I believe, continue this discussion to the next meeting as well. Both of those would be options. But then it's still sort of in the holding pattern of no decision has been made until there's a vote of at least 3.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, Having voted on the prevailing side, I would move for reconsideration of this issue. And I would like to add that I would move that the reconsideration of this issue be put on the agenda of our next meeting. Is there a timeline issue with that?
Suzanne? She's
Well,
not
yeah, I know. So there is no timeline consideration for this. This matter just remains open. There is no sort of final decision until the commission reaches a decision. So if you need to continue it to the next meeting, that is an option. Sorry, reconsideration's throwing me a little just because that's a term of art under the APA once you do a final action. So I would just say at this stage, it sounds to me like what you're asking is to just continue your consideration of this to the next meeting or to later in the meeting.
No, that's not it.
No, I'm sorry.
So I'm seeing
Robert's rules term.
Yes.
Suzanne, a motion to reconsider, and the chair is correct. Being a former parliamentarian, the chair.
So is this on the motion itself?
Yes.
On the motion.
Okay.
Not the matter, the motion.
Okay. Sorry, we're having too many reconsiderations happening here.
As the maker of the motion, I was just going to say that I put a motion on the table for reconsideration at our next meeting. It gives us the opportunity. May I speak to my motion, Mr. Chair?
So, and I think it's unnecessary because the matter could be brought forward by any commissioner at our next meeting, I believe.
Well, it could be brought forward by either Commissioner Reeves or I for a vote. I mean, we can talk about anything we want, but if we want the opportunity to reconsider our vote, then there would need to be a motion for reconsideration, and a majority of us would have to agree that we want to reconsider because we have voted. So I was just hoping to provide us with every option at our next meeting. In the meantime, we can sort through this. We can sort through it is what I was thinking.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, and Commissioner Patterson, from a Robert's Rules perspective, a motion to reconsider can happen in this meeting. If you would like to push it to another meeting, my recommendation would be that the motion be something either to Suzanne's point of to move to continue under the legal terms, or under Robert's Rules to say you move to postpone this item to our next standing meeting of August 27th, like to a time and date. Because once this meeting closes, like once this meeting adjourns, a motion to reconsider isn't relevant, if that makes sense.
It does, Commissioner Reeves, but if we vote on a motion to reconsider and a majority of us agree with that, and the chair does not bring that vote up, but asks to have that matter placed on the next meeting agenda, is that something that you can do?
Yeah.
So in my role as chair, it feels to me, my ruling would be that if there was a motion to reconsider, we could vote on that, and then that would be relevant for the remainder of this meeting. We could bring the item back up this meeting. So I guess not to diminish what you're asking, and what I want to do is do it properly. So I'll ask Suzanne the proper way to accomplish what you want to do, Commissioner Patterson, and then have that discussion. So what's the proper way to have this land on our agenda for the August 27th meeting?
Okay, and so we're in uncharted territory. I hear all of you in terms of the motions for reconsideration. We are under an APA hearing matter because this is one of your licensing enforcement actions. Therefore, the chair is your presiding officer for the purposes of the APA. And to the extent that you do not have a either a motion granting the order of default or a motion denying the order of default. Essentially, this still is sort of like open and pending at this stage. I think that there is no concerns with either doing either defaulting to your open public meeting Robert's Rules motion for reconsideration, or I think that you could go ahead and also do a motion to continue this, all right, to the appointed time. I don't see error in either of those approaches, considering that this is sort of a hybrid with very little, very little guidance.
So
Okay.
Suzanne, but if we decided not to vote to reconsider, but instead decided to consider this at the next meeting without reconsidering the vote, just move it forward so that we can continue to talk about it. Is there a time limitation for those of us who voted on the prevailing side for moving for reconsideration?
I do not believe that there is.
Okay, well then it doesn't really matter which way you want to go, Chair. I mean, if that motion could be made at the next meeting without there being a time limitation, I don't know what the answer is there, but if that's the case, then it doesn't really matter. I had the impression that there was a time limitation, that that motion to reconsider had to take place in the meeting that we are in, is what I thought, but I could be wrong about that. So I'll defer.
So,
And
and
you
I
may
think,
be, sorry, I will just note, you may be right. I know that we've looked at Robert's Rules before, and I don't believe we've had that those are formally adopted. So whether they are defaulted to sort of generally as in terms of how you're conducting your meetings, I don't think that they're binding upon the commission in this matter.
Okay.
so while I would like finality this meeting, I believe, Commissioner Patterson, that if you made a motion to continue this to the August 27th meeting, it would be in order.
Okay, so then I will revoke my previous motion, which was to reconsider, and instead I'll move that we continue this matter to the next meeting of the Gambling Commission.
All right, is there a second for that? All right, I am.
Wow, that has not happened to me in a long
Commissioner
time.
Reeves.
I was going to say, out of respect for my colleague, and given that she was so gracious in our last meeting to afford a second for us to address our petition today, I will second for continuation to the next meeting.
All right. It's been moved and seconded, moved by Vice Chair Patterson and seconded by Commissioner Reeves. Would you like to speak to your motion, Julia?
No.
Okay. So my input, I guess, to this motion is that it feels to me like finality in this meeting, which is prior to this licensee requesting a renewal, and to provide the avenues that the system is created around, and that is, I mean, this is, you can use chess or checkers, whatever it is, it's our move. So in order for the licensee to have an opportunity to take a move, I think we should be taking a move today. So I'm opposed to the motion because I believe that we should reconsider this motion and provide finality. And I also believe that we can, absent this motion, bring this issue forward at our August 27th meeting anyway.
So clarification on your comments, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
What you just said is that you would have preferred that we reconsider today, but you recognize that there's a possibility that that could happen at the next meeting. But your
Yeah.
preference would have been that we had that debate today. Is that what you
And,
said?
and I believe that there's potential consequences for us not acting today.
Well, would you please, if you don't mind, do you mind expressing what you think those might be?
Well, and that's, I think what I was saying is that the no finality or no next move for the licensee, which we already know requires interpreter services, may, based on the fact that her license is not revoked, request a renewal, which is an expenditure that is unlikely that she's going, that without this matter being resolved. And I go back to, I guess, doing this, you've been here as long as I have, Commissioner Patterson, and I know that in the past, we've had situations where a licensee's son got the mail and put it off in some pile. We did provide reconsideration there. We allowed that individual their rights to go through the process. This does not appear to be that same scenario in my mind. We have done a suspension rather than revocation on an issue where we felt one of the licensees involved was less culpable, but that was at a different stage than what this is. So in my mind, it feels like our responsibilities based on years and years and years of precedence is that this matter can be, while there are many contributing factors, I think we have to be awfully presumptuous to get to the point to where revocation isn't the appropriate action today, so that the licensee can either make their move from that revocation or move on and do whatever it is that they wish to do. So that's my perspective.
And the next commission meeting is in 2 weeks. Is that
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah, about. I've lost votes before though, so that's okay. Commissioner Reeves.
Mr. Teal, can you please remind me, you said the licensee's current license expires, did you say August 25th?
25th, correct.
So 2 days after, we will be hosting another commission meeting where presumably this body will have an answer as to whether or not this individual is seeking renewal of their license. Is that correct? Does the system, would the system? Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, could you ask that again? I'm a little bit.
Presumably, we would know by the 25th of August whether or not this licensee is intending to proactively renew their license before expiration, correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, if the plan would be to have a meeting after the date that it expires, then either it will be a application that is pending or it will be over and the license will have expired at that point.
And my understanding, Mr. Teal, is that barring no action from the body today, and assuming that we were to take this action up at the next meeting, the action before us would still be a question of whether or not to revoke the license. Is that correct? Nothing about the request will have changed, correct?
So if we were to come back on the 27th, my presentation would essentially be that we have had the hearing for default and there's nothing really to add on either side at that point. It doesn't continue and it doesn't change ultimately the responsibility that the commission has and the decision that is being asked to make. It's not going to change one way or the other. Generally speaking, if there is if we were to get charges after the fact, then we lose jurisdiction to bring an action against somebody. That was not the case here. We still have the jurisdiction over that license after the fact by way of having this hearing right now. So effectively, we would be going back and it would be the same exact question without any other facts being presented at that point.
Understood. And so then my last question, Mr. Teal, would be, presuming that we were to move forward next month, in 2 weeks, and this body were to revoke the license, and with the assumption that this individual has not applied for a new license, how long is that revocation? Is that revocation for the entire existence of this individual in our state? Or when, if and when the licensee decided at some point in the future to apply for a license renewal, I thought I heard you say that this action on the books would trigger some sort of administrative conversation within the Gambling Commission about the fact that we had acted to revoke her license and that she was applying for a renewal. Is that correct?
As unfortunately per usual, I will answer that as lawyerly as possible and give you some answers to that question. Is a revocation says that you had a license, you no longer have that license. There's nothing statutorily that says that any person that has had their license revoked is facing pending revocation charges. There is nothing that prevents that person from reapplying at any point in time. If somebody were to have their license revoked on today and you were to sign that order, tomorrow they can reapply for a license, and it starts from square one. The facts that led to that result will get to that point nonetheless, but there's nothing statutorily preventing anyone from filing a new application. It will be looked at as all applications are from the get-go, and there will be questions on that application that address whether or not you have ever had an administrative action found against your license. And so that will be something that they need to disclose as well on the application.
Perfect. Thank you. And so based on that, Mr. Chair, I will be voting in favor of continuation today, and only because I think the actions by the licensee to either proactively pursue renewal prior to expiration or the lack of action to renew will tell me as a commissioner, I think very clearly the intent of this individual, even in their absence, and therefore would feel more comfortable revoking their license in 2 weeks, pending that information.
Okay, thank you. Director Griffin.
Oh, I was just going to give the non-attorney response because I've been in licensing for so long, but it doesn't matter. When we get an application and something's flagged as revoked, there is a process, and that is you just go back and look to see and have that discussion. And again, nothing prohibits them from applying at any point in time. There's just, we start to have a conversation, which is in essence really where we were not able to continue with the licensee at this time. So, right, this doesn't have any period of time associated with revocation. What we do look at is, in having that conversation with the licensee or the applicant at that time and their potential employer is more of a conversation after we reconcile internally, what was the seriousness of the charge and what have we done with like situations moving forward? And so, sorry, I should have lowered my hand after Adam answered. Thank you.
To just tack on to what Tina said, if we deem based on that application that she is not qualified for licensure, well, at this point in time, after an hour-long discussion, we all know what the procedure is from that point on, and that will happen. We will issue a denial. She will have the option to request a hearing, and we all know where that goes from here.
Well, and actually, first and foremost, we'll give them the opportunity to withdraw their application. So there is an opportunity for somebody to go ahead and for us to, have that conversation with them and their employer about, hey, this is potentially disqualifying. You know, how would you like to proceed? And then give them an opportunity to withdraw their application so that they don't have anything on their record. Because since this is a professional license for any highly regulated industry, it's these sorts of things that, you know, are the reason we want to have that dialogue. So
That's right.
So I guess I have two things. One for you, Suzanne. So we can still revoke an expired license.
Yes, you should be able to.
So on August 27th, we could revoke a license that expired on August 25th.
Correct. I have not checked your specific statute, but as a general principle, agencies can go ahead and revoke or suspend or take action on licenses that are have either expired and or that a licensee is attempting to, say, surrender to avoid the enforcement action. So that should be within your capability.
Okay. All right. So there is a motion to continue on the table. Is there any further discussion? All right. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 I'll vote aye just so we can end this and move it to the next meeting.
Thank you. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries 3-1. Thank you all for the robust discussion and education. And Adam, I hope you will still maintain your, at least for now, interim tag. We need you. Don't run away.
I'll rescind it now. Sorry.
Don't run away. So
Happy to have the discussion, everybody.
all right, thank you, everyone. So that completes tab number 6. I'm almost afraid to give us a break, but probably should.
Please.
Somebody, yeah, we should probably take a 10-minute break. So let's come back at 2:07. All right, thank you, everyone. Okay, I'll ask commissioners to come on camera as we return, so I know that you're with us, or verbalize that you're back. Hello, Commissioner Reeves, Representative Globa.
I'm here.
Hi, Commissioner Levy. And Suzanne, we have you still.
You do.
Okay. Give Commissioner Patterson another minute or so. Welcome back, Commissioner Patterson. I think we will reconvene. Thank you, everyone. I hope you had a nice little break. So we will now move on to tab 7 on our agenda, which is the 2022 agency request legislation, with the presentation by Tina Griffin, our interim director. Tina, are you with us?
I am, thank you. So at the July public meeting, it was decided to move forward with just one agency request legislation item, and that was to authorize senior low stakes bingo at senior housing and community centers. So our deadline to file that agency request legislation with the governor's office is Monday, September 13th. And since we won't be having a commission meeting, then this will be up for final action. The package will be up for final action at your August 27th meeting. We are currently reaching out to stakeholders on this bill, and to make sure nothing has changed since we last reached out to them last year. In your packet is the proposed draft bill language. It is the same language that you approved for last year. And so I would recommend that we file the same bill language for 2022. So unless there is any, unless you have any other concerns moving forward with this language, that is all that I need today. And it will be before you, as I said, at the August 27th meeting for a decision.
Okay, Commissioner Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So being a new member to the commission, I would be curious to understand whether or not this piece of legislation falls within typical approaches that we have taken to perceived legislation around the expansion of gaming. And if so, what other examples that might look like, and recognizing that this was brought to us as a regulatory correction piece of legislation, curious to understand why the agency is moving it forward. And I know we voted on this last week, or last meeting, but these are just some questions that have popped up in the interim. And so curious to know if either the director or the chair can speak to those two topics.
So I can certainly go back, and since so much has happened from last year to this year, I need to refresh my memory, since there was a number of things that I recall that led us to this point last year. So I will have that available for you at the next meeting, and I can also share with you at that time what other agency request legislative items that we have had in the last 5 or so years, if that would be helpful to you as well. So I can share that.
I would appreciate it, Director. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I guess I'll just add that over the last few years, my effort has been that we, agency request legislation means that we're initiating it. And so those types of pieces of legislation, in my mind, should be something that improve the regulatory framework, improve our ability to accomplish our mission. So And, you know, on the other side of that, I guess, are those items that are being requested by the industry or by stakeholders that are, you know, a benefit to the business or a benefit to how they operate. So on those things that are, you know, improving business or, you know, something kind of being requested or advocated by stakeholders, you know, I think that our role should be that if the legislation meets and or exceeds our needs for a regulatory environment, then, you know, we should certainly be neutral on that. And if it's short of that, if it causes problems for the agency, then we should oppose it. So, and I kind of go back a couple years ago, and I don't remember the exact series of events, but I remember that there were a couple of pull tab bills. And I think Representative Eslick from the 39th ended up being the legislator. And those, you know, were obviously for the industry, but I think that they solved some problems for us. So while they weren't agency requests, I think that they were something that we as an agency were able to get behind and be supportive of. So I don't know that we have a specific cut and dried policy on that. I like the thought that we are support for those within the industry that, you know, need help with drafting or need, you know, some professional guidance from our agency. Of course, that is when we do have a legislative director, which we currently do not have that. So I think that we may be in a little bit of uncharted territory here on the upcoming session. As far as, you know, this specific bill, and I don't recall whether, was this bill introduced last year? Do you remember, Tina?
So no, we were requested by the governor's office to pull it back because
And it was never introduced to anyone.
No,
Okay.
so I believe that you did take a vote to pull this back in December. Then.
Okay, yeah, I couldn't remember exactly. Seems like, as you mentioned, a few things have occurred. So, I mean, with this, I know that there has been thoughts that, you know, the agency could definitely benefit from this proposal by reducing a lot of staff time. So,